All right, welcome back to my channel again. Today we have an interesting topic. About 12, 13 years ago, I actually started making barrels and bells for clarinets. In today's episode, we're going to talk about when I originally started doing that and how you can actually do it at home. It's actually fairly simple, but of course, I was a woodworker before then. Um, so I understood all the concepts. I just didn't have all the tools. But we'll see some of the things I did to make barrels, some of the ones where I made it fit to the clarinet, and we'll just have some fun with information and knowledge today. Unfortunately, due to certain circumstances, I had to stop just before buying a computerized lathe, which will allow me to make many of these steps much more easier and much more repeatable and far more accurate. But it's really fun making barrels. Matter of fact, I have a couple back here, and I have more examples over here that we'll be going over. But first, let's review the steps of how to make a clarinet, and then we'll get to the pictures and videos that I have. So here we go. Some of the minimum required tools are, of course, a wood lathe, large enough for the size of a barrel. Now, what I originally learned is I used to cut large, longer pieces into cylinders, then cut them down. But I found out it was actually a lot easier to cut these down first to the size that you want approximately, and then work on individual barrels at a time, such as these were cut down and worked on one at a time versus trying to use a cylinder and cut it that way. There's a woodworking way of cutting these pieces, which I show in a video, which is just a waste of time, really. Of course, various sandpaper for the very final steps to make everything nice and smooth. So you want to make everything nice and smooth on a barrel. Other shapes you can have. You can have any shape you want, really. Also, what I learned as I evolved my practice was instead of using different Forstner tool bits, I have these for the size of the sockets to the top and bottom socket. But I found out if you you can actually cut off to the side a bit from the central bore, and that's what this tool is about. Matter of fact, we'll get to these more in detail later on. This goes into the cylinder, keeps everything centered, and you cut the socket out and smooth out the end there. So certain tools you have, I have two of these, one for the top, one for the bottom. We'll take a closer look at these in just a minute. Forstner drill bit, which I used to originally cut the bore. Clarinet bore reamer, which I couldn't find for this video. Clarinet bore measuring tool, which I have around here somewhere. Here we go. You may have seen this before with other videos. Of course, a clarinet and the mouthpiece. And this is a tool also to hold the barrel as you're shaping it, so it can be held in the lathe a lot easier. I was planning on making a recorder at some point, so I actually have these for full length also. Anyways, we go on. We have selection of the wood, which we'll get to in a minute. The outer shape, rough cylinder shape. As I have examples here, we'll show these in more detail. Of course, cutting out the sockets, as I mentioned. And of course, doing it properly with the proper tools. And I'm going to turn on a different camera here to show these things in more up close, then work on the finalized shapes and everything. Metal rings I found too hard were do manually. There are methods of using stenciling tools where you can have a barrel on another device and you can cut shapes consistently over and over again. But once you got to a computerized lathe, it would have been done easily. Let me show you some of the tools more up close real quickly. So here's a couple examples. This is a striped ebony piece of wood. They come wax covered. That's how they ship them, to prevent the wood from absorbing water and everything. This is a marble wood. This was Madagascar ebony, the one that's in a cylinder shape. See, there's really nothing on the ends yet. A couple examples where only the bore is cut. Here's a fatter one with the bore being cut, and also some sockets in there, with the basis for sockets. These ones are actually functional. Finished one, nicely polished. One of my more fatter ones. You can get wood all sizes and shapes. Here's a smaller block I have up here of cocobolo. So basically, size of one barrel for a thinner barrel. One thing I did too is I did play around in making alto and tenor plugs out of the wood too. Fairly simple to do. You'll see other examples up on my wall. Let's get to some pictures here. Here's a little piece on my lathe when I was first learning how to do this. One thing I learned with the finer dust particles I was doing here is you always want to use a industrial, basically an N95 industrial mask I always used. And with all the, if you're doing this indoors, with all the little wood chips, especially when you're sanding it, if you had one of those Vicks warm room humidifiers, use when you're sick or something. If you had one of those, that actually would put water into the air, and the dust would absorb that and fall to the ground rather than floating in the air all the time. Make it a lot easier to clean up, and not all this dust in the air all the time. Some more pictures of just cutting away. You can see it's kind of rough here. Here I was checking to see how it would fit onto a boxwood clarinet. It actually fit in once I finished it quite easily. And then the other side, you have to make sure it becomes the same size for the mouthpiece. And you would cut out, there's some other Forstner bits you see in the background that were designed for the sockets. One of the things I did was I've always measured clarinets to learn how they're designed. So measuring the barrels was just an additional step. But I have a spreadsheet with a wide variety of barrels and their shapes and size and socket size and the way the bore is inside the barrel. And parts of the spreadsheet also has, and I'll probably show it at the end if I remember, clarinets, where the tone holes are in relation to the top of the clarinet, in addition to their width and the type of tone hole. If it was tapered at all, the tone hole I actually measured in multiple locations. I can measure the outside, the middle, and the inside in the end. Here's a more pretty boxwood clarinet. Oh, there's the block of wood I started with. Started cutting it down, as you see there. Cut it down more, cut it down to a cylinder. Guess this was the mouthpiece that came with it. You can see kind of like a before at the very beginning as it gets cut down more with the sockets in it. You notice though, this tenon though is not cylindrical. It's slightly tapered. Here's some more pictures we have. This, I was doing a LeBlanc concerto. I was making some barrels for it, for the player. They need a little bit longer ones. A little bit fuzzy out of, there we go. I forgot what wood that was. Not this. Fuzzy out of fuzzy pictures. Some of the key work. rebuilt up. There was during the build. Here I was holding the clarinet up on the lathe so I could polish the posts easier. Here I get into oiling the barrel near the end before I polish it. Polish it with a wax to seal in the surface. Here are some older pictures of cutting out the socket with a Forstner bit before I advance to a different tool here, measuring the height of the barrel at that time. Mopani wood. You'll find a lot of woodworking people when they make long shafts or something to cut it into pieces. They'll cut into the wood and kind of slide it like this and then cut it off later versus just using a bandsaw or other saw to cut it into pieces you want first. Different lengths of wood. Cutting things out. Pile of wood chips. Expect a lot of wood chips if you try this. Just a lot of wood chips. Here I was trying to figure out the best way of measuring out the barrel. Just sliding it out again. Cutting it down. Shaping it. This looks like it was already polished. So already sanded it down and polished it. Here's some more complete pictures. Here's a block of wood being cut down to a cylinder. Shaped, a piece of it shaped. Here it's sitting on top of a center tone clarinet. Similar to shape to this one. We'll get closer pictures of these in the end. Cutting down. Should have taken a bandsaw to it. Forstner bit for the bore. Cutting out the bore. You see all the wood there. That's why I don't want to use a regular drill. I originally started with a nice kind of regular looking wood drill bit, but it clogged up too easily. So I went to a Forstner drill bit, which pulled out the wood much easier and gave a more squared off end, especially when doing the sockets originally that way. I can see shaping it. Oh yeah, I used to do. Some woods are not very good for clarinets. They absorb too much water and oil and they actually become soggy. This was a test I was doing with different woods after I kind of cut them out in oil. Some of them actually got soggy. It was amazing. I forgot which woods off the top of my head. Tons of sandpaper. Here's one that finished the wood oil absorption. Then it gets polished. I may still have that. Is that this one? Nope. Nope. Different one. Fun thing is you can make the shape any way you want. Better if you keep the top and the bottom really thick with the wood. As I mentioned before, you don't want to try to cut it for rings because you have to be really exact. Barrels is fun, but it's manually doing it by yourself, one by one. It takes a lot of work. So I was looking to automate the whole process. Here you're taking a block, cutting it down to a cylinder, cutting the cylinder down into individual cylinders, then working on it that way, figuring out ways of making the production faster. Oh, here's a couple finished barrels in the bottom right with that type of wood. You can see it being cut out and bore out. Using this tool, I'll show you up close in a minute. Making sure the socket is the right size for a LeBlanc LL looks like. And the mouthpiece. It kind of looks funny, doesn't it? Block of wood sitting there. There's some finished pieces. Like I said, you can design it any way you want, shape it any way you want. I don't remember what the wood was, but I remember I had one of these really thick at one time. It sounded great on the clarinet. And then I just put in the lathe and I slimmed it all down, make it a slim line, put it back in the clarinet, and it lost its full tone and everything. And I usually test clarinets with this with a synthetic reed, so it should just work. I wanted to glue the wood back on it, make it nice sounding again. More pictures there. There's one thing we have to remember too is remember wood is natural. So if you had the same size squares, I found out once when I had two pieces cut down to the same size, they're vastly different in weight. You could feel it holding it in your hand. So you gotta be careful. Well, it depends what you want. The density of wood. You know, when they hand select wood for certain clarinets, like say a Buffet Prestige R13 versus a regular R13, I really think that they probably check the weight of the wood in a certain production level because that would tell you how dense the wood is. Because the denser the wood seems to give a better sound. That's just stuff I've read about when I've done a lot of research into it. But it was quite amazing the different weights of two similar sized pieces of wood. I measured them all out, cut them to the same size, put them on a scale, and it was like I forgot a couple ounces heavier before they were cut and everything. This shows you the process. Here's a cylinder, block on the left, cylinder on the right, and finished product in the middle. It's actually a lot of fun. Oh, look at this wood. Some junk I had in the past. I actually think these are pictures from online. I don't remember. Yeah, look at all the wood chips you create. You just create a ton of wood chips. Absolute ton. More cylinders. Now, as you can see, African blackwood, when you get to the outer part of the wood, you'll see stripes in it because you get from outside the inner core. Now you can use black polish, which is a black stain, to make the whole thing black, and that's what a lot of manufacturers do. Is they don't use the prime piece of the wood. They may use other pieces of the wood which has stripes through it, and they just basically stain it. That's why wood is stained, and sometimes even painted on the really cheap ones. I used to make bowls and stuff. That was fun. Oh yeah, there's a lot of this shows you right here, this picture. And African blackwood, there's like 12 names for it. You have to remember. So it shows you the deepness black in the middle. As you get to the outer part of the wood, you can get stripes in the wood too. And so selection is really important. And then they stain it, of course. They pick something else. Here's a video where I cut down a block to a cylinder. A lot of wood chips flying all over the place. In this case, this is a rough cutter, so you're getting big wood chips. But it still gets all over you. Later on, I would create a shroud for this to keep all the wood chips in that primary area. Wasn't quite tight enough between the chucks there. This is how you make table legs, by the way. Except usually on a bigger lathe. Yeah, it could be a little bit better. Try and smooth out cylinder a bit there. There you go. I have a whole bunch of tools for woodworking. Here's a couple. You can see how they're shaped and everything. Here's a flat one. Let's change cameras real quickly. Here's a little bit more up close. Here's one for doing some initial rough cutting. Cut that wood down. Here's one for creating a little bit more flatter. And there's tons of other tools you can use. So what I was using to put the barrel in to start shaping its outside. You unscrew one side, put it in to the bore and start working the outside. This is a drill chuck with a Forstner bit on it to cut the basic bore, original bore. This I have a couple of. This shaft here goes into the bore, and you have one cutter here and a second cutter here. So it cuts out the socket, the first one. Second one makes the end nice and smooth and round. And I got two of these because they're different size. Here's a manual cutter I got to make some tweaks. Here's a manual cutter I have to make some tweaks to the bore. You can also change the angle if you need to. Bore measuring tool. Bore measuring tool. Put in here, you adjust that down and then measure this. You know the diameter. You can do the bottom side too. If it's cylindrical, it'll be the same, which this one is. Otherwise, you have to measure that one. Made some saxophone plugs, like I mentioned, for alto and tenor. Fun stuff. Here's one barrel I had. Couple barrels in different stages. But that is the basics to making barrels. As you work through it, improve your process, and actually have some fun doing it too. Try different woods for your clarinet. There's loads you can do there. But hopefully soon I'll be getting back to it, just not manually, having more of an automated process. Anyways, I hope you learned something today. I want to thank you for listening to my ramblings. Any questions or comments, put it down below. Also, don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. You gotta love the knowledge, gotta love life, and gotta love clarinets. And you gotta love clarinet barrels. How many of you out there have more than 2 or 3 or 4 for each clarinet? Anyways, we'll see you next time. Have fun.